I think that mental health as a general rule in the legal profession isn't that great. I think that the attorneys with the most mental health problems tend to be at the largest law firms in a lot of cases in the largest cities. The main thing I think that impacts mental health for attorneys is attorneys will sit in an office all day. They won't have a lot of contact with people sometimes. They're in front of a computer. People are very, very critical of their work. They're expected to be sitting in an office, billing a lot of long hours alone. They're constantly worried about losing their job and not doing things right. People are very critical of them. Clients are critical. The law firm is critical. Everybody's very critical. You're selling your time and you're expected to sell as much as you can. So you're not socializing. You're not getting a lot of feedback from people. A lot of attorneys get divorced. They drink too much or use drugs to cope with the issues and the stress. They don't get outside a lot. They don't necessarily exercise. They don't do all the things that the people need to do in order to have good mental health. And on top of that, most attorneys are extremely competitive. So they kind of bottle everything up inside. And I know lots of attorneys that have died. And I mean, I'm just thinking of one attorney in particular I know that died, and he was an attorney who was actually representing me. And when he died, one of his friends came by and said he just had bottled everything up inside. A lot of them have like very serious mental health issues. Another thing that makes it difficult is where you're fighting all the time with other people. You take that home with you, so it becomes very difficult to have good relationships with children and spouses and that sort of thing as well. It was a manager that we hired, and he was administering the test that he had been trained to administer. He was a manager for a BCG attorney search, so we were trying to hire recruiters, and the recruiters were all people at the time that we believed that they needed to come out of large law firms and be very successful and had gone to large law schools and all these sorts of factors that make a good, that we believe would make a good recruiter because they could identify with the attorneys. That's kind of the model that we've always followed. So he started giving these personality tests to people, and he'd been in another industry before. I think he'd been in the legal industry, but he had been in charge of recruiting and managing paralegal and legal secretary kind of placement business. And then he said they were all coming back and they had all these things that were wrong with them, and they would say things like, this person's ready to explode. And this is someone we interviewed for a manager position. And then I read later that the person was arrested in attempted murder charges, or he said this person would break the law if they were pushed to do it. And this was another person. I mean, the first guy that they said was ready to explode was from a big New York firm, and then the next person was from a big San Francisco firm, and they said he would break the law at some point in the future probably. And this guy that ended up being arrested for trying to smuggle someone from Mexico underneath the back seat of a Lincoln Continental, which is crazy. And these are like attorneys from major law firms, and so just all these things. And so he just kept saying, you can't hire this person, you can't hire this person because they're all crazy. And it was funny because it was one person after another. So we were trying to hire people from large law firms with stellar academic records, and they were all coming back and they all had things wrong with them. And I don't know if they were coming into the profession with those problems or if they were developing those problems through law school and through working in the large law firms, but that's what the test said. A lot of times the work can be very stressful. A lot of things can function just like if you make a single mistake, it can be a very big deal and people get very upset. I remember when I first started practicing law, I was working for a judge, and I was sitting in my office one day, and he came in and there was like this rage, and I was like, what the heck's wrong with this guy? And he called me into his office, and he had two doors, and so he closed like the first one, which he always closed, and then he closed the second one, which he never closes, which kind of created this. And he pulled out this document. He said, look at this. And it was just some random order. I've been going through and I've been like looking at these prisoner petitions. And so it was like, the petition is denied, or this person's approved, this person's denied. And so you go through these prisoner petitions, and there's like hundreds of them. And you just go through because they're trying to petition to get out of jail. And I made a typo in one of them. And I think it was something like, might have let the guy out of jail. Or something. I mean, he wouldn't have gotten out of jail. There was all this other stuff that would have happened, but he was so upset, and it was just like this one little typo, and it was a mistake. And so everything can depend on deadlines. I know another girl that she was a 7th or 8th year attorney and had gone to Harvard Law School, and there's these things called requests for admissions, where they ask you to admit certain things. And if you don't remember to attach a verification, which is signed by the client saying, I approve all these or whatever these answers, and then you submit it, then all these things are deemed to be admitted, even though you wrote down. I mean, it's crazy. So it was like from a huge client, and it took like months for them to like fight this whole thing, this mistake she made. Otherwise, the client would have lost lots of money in this lawsuit. So there's all these things that can happen that are just very, very scary. Like you can make typos, or you can forget a document or do something wrong. And I mean, that's one reason attorneys charge so much by the hour. But you are constantly on pins and needles. You don't want to make a mistake. And so the work can be very, very stressful for attorneys because someone's always trying to find them make a mistake, and people are making mistakes, and you have to just constantly be alert and making sure things aren't occurring. And so your life is never, like you're never kind of coasting and calm. And so that can drive people crazy because it's almost like being a prisoner. You don't know when you're going to get shocked or when something's going to happen. And you never can let your guard down. You always have to be alert. So that's one thing. And so attorneys are like that with their peers. Like, what are you talking about? And with their spouses. And they just can be very like that. And then I think because there's so many mistakes and stuff, a lot of times they dislike their coworkers. They're in this environment where they're in their office and people are finding fault with their work and afraid of making mistakes. And they're sitting in this office, and it's almost like being a prisoner because you're just sitting in this office all day and you're doing this work. And no one really appreciates what you're doing. Your coworkers are trying to have you make mistakes. The clients are mad that they're spending all this money on you. The partners and so forth, if you're other partner, they're competing to get more compensation. It's a very stressful job. A lot of times people suffer from, I think, a lack of kind of positive one-on-one interaction. They're just not, it's not like it's fun, having fun with people. It's like you're around people that you don't know if you can trust and that sort of thing. And the work's stressful. I think that a lot of times attorneys are looking for success and recognition. They don't necessarily get that practicing law. They're just very few compliments and positive things that are said. So that can be difficult, makes the attorneys resentful. So what happens, especially to like a lot of young attorneys or older ones, is you come out of school and all of a sudden as a first-year attorney, you make $200,000 a year. So you become enthusiastic about kind of your position in the world. You think you can buy a house and you can buy yourself a nice car and you can do all these things. But in order to pay for these things, you need to keep working. And a lot of times attorneys will have children and then they'll start sending the children to schools. And so if you make $200,000 or $500,000 or $1 million or $2 million a year, people typically find reasons to spend it. And then they don't just spend the money, but they obligate themselves to expenses that they may never finish paying for. And so then they have no option. They're handcuffed to this. And so think about being handcuffed to a job where you have to continually do this thing that you don't like, where you're in this office every day and people are attacking you and you're worried about making small mistakes and you're not talking to people and you're isolated in an office and you're just sitting there. And these law firms can be very depressing places too. I mean, if you walk in one of them, I remember one time I was in a big law firm in LA and I was waiting for someone and I was sitting there for like 45 minutes in a hall, in this huge hall, like waiting for someone. And all the offices were full, but I didn't hear anybody. It was just like silence up on the like 30th floor of the skyscraper. And it's just complete silence. It can be depressing. You just hear like a little phone ring and then someone kind of whispering. It was a kind of a rare white shoe law firm. It can be tough. The other thing is attorneys, not only do they feel handcuffed, but I think in a lot of cases, the constant conflict can take its toll. It's so much stress, and attorneys don't really get time to unwind. They don't take vacations a lot of times because they want to keep their hours up. Even if they do take vacations, they don't take very long vacations because they're afraid of getting away from matters and getting off cases and so forth that they may be working on. I mean, I was in a law firm once and I was in there 4th of July and half the law firm or more was there. And the 4th of July, it was absolutely crazy. And then I remember there was a party that was being hosted, I think at this place called Descanso Gardens, which is in La Cañada outside of Los Angeles. And the partner that was hosting it, everybody showed up at this party, which just started at like 7, so I've been at the office. And the partner that was hosting it didn't even show up at his own party, he was still at the office. So there's a conflict, it's stress. The stress, I think, makes people psychologically off base, makes them sick, makes them get cancer and all this stuff, and heart attacks, and then lack of positive social interaction. This conflict takes a toll on their personal lives. I mean, it creates divorces, it creates kids with drug problems and rebellious kids that don't have their parents around. And almost every attorney I've known, with very few exceptions, have been divorced. Because, I mean, how could you possibly keep a marriage up when you're hardly ever home? And then when you are home, when you're stressed out and you don't want to talk, or you just want to rest or drink or whatever, it's tough. And the other ideas too is, I mean, it's just, attorneys are just taught to be cynical. I mean, you have to be a fault finder, anticipate what's going to go wrong. And that type of psychology is not a fun person to be, like, very negative and cynical, because you can do the same thing with yourself. Like, if you're constantly finding fault with things that are wrong with something, and you're doing that all day and finding fault with other people's arguments and finding fault with mistakes being made in documents and stuff, that critical nature will turn itself back on you, because you'll find fault with yourself as well and see, like, what's wrong with you, and that can hurt you. But the whole idea of needing to bill hours all the time is stressful. I mean, your value as an attorney is based on how many hours you're billing. I mean, I remember my first legal job. I quit my first legal job, and they came by and they were trying to get me to, like, stay, which was nice. If it was me and someone quit a legal job, then they probably should have just been like, good for you, go. But because if someone doesn't want to do it, they should let them go. It's not right to have people there who don't want to do it. I mean, for the firm to have someone there, because it just undermines everyone around them. But they were trying to get me to stay, and I was like, well, this person didn't make partner, and I thought they were a really good attorney. And they said, well, they only billed 2,700 hours, and the person we did make partner billed 3,100. And 2,700 hours is just insane. I mean, 3,100 is a lot more, definitely. But the idea is that your value is based on your hours. It's not based on contribution. You're just like a number, and a lot of times, and that's disappointing. You're not. It's almost like a soulless type of thing. Like, you're just a number. Like, this is who I am. I'm 3,000 hours. I'm 2,100 or 2,700 hours, and that can be very difficult. If an attorney stops billing, you can lose your job. If you don't do good work for someone that assigns you work, and they could blackball you. If you're an associate and you're working in a large law firm, you may only be able to stay there 7 or 8 years before you lose your job. A lot of the work that attorneys do too can be very undermining. I mean, if you think about what an attorney does, an attorney's job basically is to support people or to help people get out of trouble that are doing more important things. Big business is out there. CEOs of big businesses make tens of millions of dollars a year, and meanwhile there's an attorney doing, like, helping them with their little things, or these big companies or other people doing important things. So a law firm is a lawyer supporting people that are out there kind of in the world making deals and doing business, and they're just kind of helping them with little types of things. And a lot of the work, especially in the corporate market and patent prosecution and a lot of real estate and stuff, can be very, like, tedious and kind of almost clerical in nature. So a lot of times people that go to super prestigious law schools and are very smart may have these kind of active minds, and all of a sudden they're doing kind of clerical work, and they may not like that. So the pay, even though it can seem like a lot of money, can be very low based on the number of hours. The requirement that you're kind of always present in the law firm or around is very difficult. I mean, I remember I was in an office next to an attorney that worked these incredible hours. Like, he was working all the time. He showered in the firm almost every morning and slept in his car because he didn't want to drive like 45 minutes to his house. So he'd sleep in the car a couple nights a week. And then he went to Disneyland, or Disney World. He flew out there and he decided to walk around the park a little bit after he'd done some work. So like 4 or 5 o'clock at night, which would have been, 2 o'clock in the afternoon in Los Angeles. So he decided to take a walk around and didn't have a cell phone with him, or his cell phone died or something. And the firm got very, very angry with him, a partner, and just that he wasn't reachable for a short period of time. So there's that. You're always in danger of losing your job inside of a law firm. That's very stressful for a lot of attorneys because you could lose your job in any second. I mean, and especially in recessions, when the work dries up, you can lose your job. When you could lose your job for the stupidest things, it's completely crazy. And I knew a guy that was a partner in a law firm, or not a partner, he was a senior associate in a law firm. He was a couple weeks away from being elected partner. And he'd been at this firm working these crazy hours, these like 2,800 hours, 3,000 hours a year for several years. And in passing, a partner asked him one morning, "Did you send this letter last night?" And he said, "Yes, I did." And he hadn't sent it. I don't know if he wasn't thinking that he hadn't sent it, or what happened, or he was lying. He might have just been lying. But when the law firm found out he hadn't sent it, they just fired him for not sending the letter because they said he lied. And then they fired him and proceeded to blackball him all of Los Angeles. The poor guy couldn't get a job. They would say horrible things about him to anybody that he lied. And they were very mad at him for lying. And I felt like that was really something. So that's the kind of stress that attorneys deal with. I mean, your career can be destroyed in a minute for making a mistake. And lawyers, a lot of times, don't like that kind of stress for obvious reasons. The longer attorneys practices, the less marketable they become. So you're very marketable when you're like a first through fifth or 6-year associate, and then as you get further along, you become less marketable. So you work very hard when you're young, but then you're not marketable when you get older, which is crazy. And then from partners, and partners are marketable based on the amount of business that they have, and so it can be very difficult for them if they lose a client, or so it's hard for attorneys that are more senior as well. And then it's not fun having to document every minute you work. I mean, they have to write down all their hours, and so you're always on the clock, sort of. Every second you spend is monitored. I still have horrible dreams about having like 2 or 3 weeks where I haven't billed an hour for some reason. And I wake up in the middle of the night like terrified of it. And I think a lot of attorneys do. And then the other thing that really kind of stinks about being an attorney is that there's all these social hierarchies. There's the most prestigious firms, and then there's inside of the most prestigious firms, there's all these people, these different levels, and then there's the less prestigious firms, and then there's people that went to the best law schools, or that didn't go to the best law schools, or that have the biggest clients and don't have the biggest clients. Or your practice area, like certain practice areas are more prestigious than others, and you're constantly reminded of your shortcomings, and literally like a daily basis. I mean, attorneys will think that they're better than you because they're at a bigger firm, or they'll think they're better than you because they have better pedigree, and so they're always talking down to each other and up to each other. And what happens on a daily basis? You're constantly aware of that, and then you're constantly aware of your limitations. If your hours are low, you're aware of that. If you don't have enough business, you're aware of that. If you are in a practice area that's not prestigious, you're constantly aware of that. And it's almost like being a serf in the Middle Ages, and some people don't like that, being constantly aware of what's wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with not being like a perfect attorney, but being aware of your shortcomings on a constant basis is very difficult. So you're never getting approval. And then not only that, but attorneys are constantly on the losing side. If you're a litigator, you're going to lose the case or get a bad deal half the time, or more than half the time. If you're a corporate attorney and you're up against a better corporate attorney, they're going to slip some language in or play some games or get something in a place where they're going to win too and take advantage of you, and they'll flatter you and play all sorts of games. So it's really kind of a dog-eat-dog world. Well, it's interesting. I was thinking about this today. I mean, there's kind of like, and I see this from law professors a lot of times too, like they kind of have these academic minds that talk about big ideas and so forth. And an attorney doesn't really have that. They kind of strip away all the bullshit, when they become an attorney in a big firm, and they become very kind of focused and deliberate about the way they talk and stuff. But one of the things I've seen, you'll get these people that are kind of these philosophy or humanities, English or whatever backgrounds. And a lot of times when they're younger, they're very interested in ideas and so forth. And they come in and they'll become very angry and caustic and like just really kind of on pins and needles. And a lot of times they'll be angry, they'll gain weight, they'll look completely different. The practice of law just does something to them. I've seen that all the time. People that come out of like English backgrounds or humanities backgrounds will go to law school a lot of times because it seems like the most logical thing for them to do, because what else are you going to do? But when they come in, it changes them and makes them completely different people. As you become an attorney and you start seeing you're not feeling good about yourself, or you're feeling like very stressed all the time and you're unhappy and you're not the person you were, you need to realize that it's not you going crazy, it's kind of the job you're in. And when people leave the practice of law and do other things, in almost all cases, not all of them, but they're much happier and they never come back. I talk to women all the time, like a woman that goes on maternity leave or something and then leaves the practice of law, but maybe her husband works too, or someone that goes and does something else. When they leave, they never come back. Like they'll talk to me and they'll be like, oh, I'm thinking about going back to a big firm, and I'll talk to them about it, but then they'll always be like thinking about it later and will almost always never come back because they're happier not doing it. That doesn't mean everyone that does it's unhappy, and it is a good job, and there are people, like a lot of people, that are very suited to the practice of law, but for the most part, it's the job that's causing their issues. And the people that have the most problems are people that are in large cities, in major law firms. That's what I see, especially like New York, markets like that. That's where the biggest issues are. I think it's the type of people that you practice with and the type of environment you practice with. If you practice in a major legal market, a lot of times you're going to be more of a commodity. They don't want you to make partner. They don't want you to have relationships with their clients. They want to just pay you money and have you go away at some point. One of the things that I think is important to remember is a lot of the problems that people are suffering inside of law firms tend to happen more in big markets than smaller ones. If you like to practice the law and you like the work, I mean, I personally liked it. I mean, I like the writing, I like the arguing. It's the other stuff, like the forcing all the work and stuff that can create the problems. So I think that I like smaller markets. I like a lot of times smaller firms. All the time I see people in smaller markets, and they typically in a smaller market, like you'll start in a law firm and you'll just be there for your career. I mean, you won't, or maybe you'll switch firms once or something, but you'll just stay there and you'll have a good career, and you'll be a part of the community, and you'll be respected for being a lawyer, and you'll be happy, and you'll enjoy yourself. And you can do that in a large market too. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible, and tens of thousands of people do. I mean, it's not, but I see the people that are the happiest a lot of times are in the smaller markets. They're not part of that whole competitive pressure. They're not concerned about kind of the hierarchy of different attorneys and so forth, and they're just, it's not a big deal to them. It's more relaxing, and so you can do that. A lot of times attorneys will go back and get an MBA or something, or go to school. But I like the idea of working in a smaller market, or smaller law firm, or a large law firm where you feel comfortable with the people. One of the things I think that makes attorneys do very well is that they do have good persuasive abilities. They learn that. They have a lot of detail. And working in a very demanding environment or a very demanding profession makes them very well suited to doing lots of different things. They can do tons of things where they'll do very well. I mean, attorneys can do very well at business development. They can do very well at sales. They can do very well in lots of things. Politics, obviously, which is a big one. So when attorneys leave, if they're not so burned out from the work and that they've done, and they maintain themselves, they can do very well in almost any profession. And they do. I mean, to go to law school in the first place, you have to be very motivated. So most people, it's not something they'd be interested in. And then to excel in law school, you have to be very motivated. And then to get into a big firm, you have to be motivated. And then to stay in a big firm a long time, you have to be motivated. So that motivation, the training you get as an attorney, can make you do exceptionally well in anything. You just have to really draw on your strengths, and you have to think of what am I good at, and what do I enjoy. People do all sorts of things. I mean, I've known one that started a furniture store, and there, I mean, just all sorts of jobs you can start and you can do well at, but you have to put in the same level of commitment and stuff that you do when you're practicing law if you're going to do well. One of the things that I see is attorneys spend years thinking about things that they could do differently, or trying another career, or doing something. They never do it because they're so handcuffed to paying for a house or paying for all these things. And the thing is that I've seen is I know so many attorneys that are unhappy or depressed, and right now in my life I'm almost 50 years old, and I mean, I literally know so many attorneys that have just died or just are so unhappy. And if you don't like what you're doing, you have to do something different. If the rewards aren't there, they're not there. So you need to live your life now and really do whatever you can to have a good life, because no one's going to do it for you. One of the biggest pieces of advice I got was from a very well-balanced partner in a major law firm that he retired at the age of, I think, 45. But he said, you know, you have to look out for yourself, and you have to take the time and do things for yourself, because in a law firm, if you're billing hours, no one's going to tell you to stop. No one's going to say, look out for yourself, because you're making money for them. So you have to look out for yourself, and no one's going to help you. I mean, no one's going to tell you to do these things, and no one's going to look out for your self-interest. I mean, if you're unhappy and you're constantly unhappy and you're angry and you find yourself getting divorced, or you find yourself drinking too much, or you find yourself constantly thinking about what you're going to do differently, or dreaming about going on vacation, maybe you need to try something else.